Hello and welcome to this special Women's Day interview. I am with the amazing Ayesha Singh. My name is Vaibhav Rajka. Let's ask her a few questions and figure out what this bright, young, upcoming talent is up to and going to do in the future. Hi, Ayesha.
Hi, my name is Ayesha Singh, and I'm an interdisciplinary artist based out of New Delhi. A lot of my work references architecture and
Yeah,
ways in which hierarchy is built through architecture, often looking at things that we almost, as people that encounter spaces, pick up subconsciously and um, start to respond to it without actually realizing it. And the idea here is to unpack those elements and communicate it to all of you.
it's amazing. So I have been noticing that your recent work have an element of minimalism. And for the uninitiated and for that the beautiful work behind of you, that very delicate it almost looks like a line drawing to me. I've told you this much, but you should know that that's a sculpture. I want to ask you, can we initiate a conversation? I want you to ask you. Let's have the simplest minimalism chat ever. Can you explain minimalism to all of us?
Sure. Um, well, I'll tell you about the way that my work encounters it because I had actually started looking at architecture at the end of my undergrad. And it had come from a space in Delhi, which
Mhm.
has this structure that just has a map of the area within it.
Yeah,
But the map of the area, it's 12 feet tall, 8 feet wide. The map is now starting to sort of uh, erase itself off because it's basically not being used. It's never been repainted. But
yeah,
it's this huge structure. It's got a form equal function box at the top. And these Hindu architectural curves that you see in Hindu temples,
yeah.
mimicking those, you have this little plinth under it.
All right.
And when I was studying in London, and when you're in another country and you're away from your home, you feel this kind of displacement that lets you question things that were otherwise very incongruous in your landscape.
Yeah,
And this form was quite peculiar, but very
yeah,
familiar at the same time. And so that's when I started looking at sort of colonial architecture, post-colonial architecture, and where these influences come from. But also when it came to responding to it, I wanted to make something that's not bulky, that doesn't suddenly try to take space in our constructed landscape. And initially, I'd actually started these works as smoke and light works. So they
yeah.
were these smoke and light
Oh,
structures that you would walk into, and it'll completely engulf you. So above you, around you, all you see is this sort of structure. It can trick your brain to thinking that it's physical, but you can
yeah.
pass your body through it, you can pass your hand through it. And then from there, I started to think more about how these structures in my sketchbook could exist as simple line drawings in physical space. And that's when
Yeah.
I turned towards metal and using a very like minimal line. So we're really reducing from what that bulky structure would be to
Yes.
now the quiet line drawing that one can then encounter. The large ones now, which are 9 feet tall to 11 feet tall.
I want to ask you about the large ones. At the risk of being, we spoke about this the last time we met, where you called me sexist, and I was like, okay, I'm going to ask this question. I'm going to put it out there on camera, and I agree that I had a
Gonna go
bias.
for it.
I'm going to go
Go
for
for
it.
it.
But because I remember you have an opportunity to like fix me also and fix, you were sitting on something here.
Hmm.
I made a comment to you saying that your works seem to have been made like they seem like would be made classically by a male artist, because there's so much metal, there's so much concrete. You use the DC motor, there's welding involved, and you mentioned that somebody in your college in California also said that, hey, I thought a man did these sculptures. But this seemed to, how do you respond to that at a time, this is a Women's Day special interview. So that's the reason why I'm asking this question. I brought this in at the risk of making me look bad. But I thought I wanted to, and I apologize for that, but I wanted to ask you, how did you respond at the time when somebody asked you back in college when you told me that somebody had said. What is your take, and what would you say to, maybe, I mean, not in a preachy way, but like, what would you say to the other girls who are coming up and doing these classically, these using materials which are in a way very, grimy, greasy. There's fire involved, and it's very, yeah.
Ooh. So it was actually at the Yorkshire Sculpture Park, and I was at college at the moment,
Yeah,
but there was a middle-aged man who had come up to me and said, "Oh, are you showing in this show?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Where's your work?" And I said, I'm standing right next to it." And he looked at it and he said, "I thought a man would have built this."
yeah,
And that was actually the first time that such a comment was related to me. After that, it has come up a few times, but it's interesting how we connect
yeah,
material to gender, right?
yeah.
And then I think that's also coming from the fact that we connect labor to gender. And so the labor that's
Hmm.
associated with a particular material is what the connotations that people are picking up. And now this is in England and in Delhi. Um, I think one of the things that I'm actually really keen on doing, because it's been tough to find metal spaces that would, here in Delhi, let me do
Yeah,
the work, right? Or let me handle the equipment. But there are spaces that are open to, and especially people who work in steel, who are
yeah,
interested to train, well, women or like gender non-conforming people towards creating things out of metal. Usually welding is what we're interested in.
yeah,
And the idea here is to start something that really opens people's minds towards it, because I was lucky that I was in a school at SAIC where I learned how to weld, where some of the most fantastic welders in our workshop were all women.
oh,
And it was
okay,
not a gender thing in terms of what material I can use and what processes I can learn. So even in art and tech, when I was learning how to code, to be able to move the motors the way that they do,
yeah,
I was never looked at for any private parts. I was looked at for my brain, and what I wanted to construct with it and how to sort of go about the production of it, rather than
yeah,
any other connotations that come in through material. But that, I mean, it is a bias that exists in the world, but it's
yes.
not a bias that we need to ever conform towards.
That's true. You're talking of, getting your identity. You did this fantastic metal work of flag, right?
Mm.
And I wanted to ask you this feeling of, I had to write the question down, because in a way your the idea of migration has been a lingering idea in your practice. Migration, you've had this theme in a way, like, through a bunch of your work, and I want to ask
Mm.
you that, is there any common denominator that you find in your own practice? Because you did flags. I mean, in a way, can you maybe tell the viewers what that the idea for doing these amazing large scale flags were? You did them in metal, by the way. We might show the images. I'll share your images also in this video. So
Yeah. Um, I would say history, architecture, identity,
yeah,
power.
yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah, power has
that,
also been a recurring thing. Which is,
yeah.
so in a way, for
And
the basically, what are you on? Like what's
uh,
happening? What's
in
cooking?
time.
What?
So time also plays its own part, in which where we're looking at the past, we're looking at present,
Yeah,
and the ways in which they create value systems for the future as well, which is like unavoidable when you're looking at architecture, because something that's created today will last for generations to come, right? So
yeah,
present value
yeah.
systems might perpetuate in various ways into, right? The past
Mm,
perpetuates into the present, and present into the
yeah.
future in that way.
You manifest it.
Um, and some of the works actually attempt to completely um, allow that to collide in a way. Like the drawings on paper allow for layers of time to be presented as an amalgamation, right? Which is
Wow.
how
Yeah,
we encounter architecture in the present. Even when you're looking at Delhi's landscape, the various sort of kingdoms that we're looking at, the various colonial moment.
Yeah, they were in somebody's sketchbook as drawings once, and then they manifest. They became, in a way, society,
That's the
colony.
thing, is that when you look at intention, because I have been reading books about, let's say, Herbert and Baker, and how they um, thought of and idealized the construction of Rashtrapati Bhavan, and how that
Oh
was
yeah,
earlier seen as the Viceroy's house, for example. But when you look at each element,
yeah,
where the ornamentation is coming from, why do we have Mughal gates at Rashtrapati Bhavan along with like a whole colonnade, right? So
yes,
where these references come from, they have very intentionally placed them there. It's just that we sort of become very familiarized with these spaces and accept them
yes,
for as they are. Now, 2020 with our multiple lockdowns, but also we had the Delhi riots at that time, which were because of the change in citizenship, right? And the citizenship laws. Now, that was something that I think a lot of us grew up thinking that it's very concrete. We don't
hmm.
think that someone can switch the idea of citizenship or even the actual part of
Yeah.
it.
I agree. Yes,
Yeah. Um, but at that time, yeah, something that we usually, it's something that we think is concrete as soon as we grow up. But I had a show that was called It Was Never Concrete, because literally it seems like everything is malleable, um, including what laws can do to affect every individual on this planet. At that time, I was actually reading Sri Rupa Roy's text, which breaks down the intention of how the flag was designed. So from Nehru to Gandhi to so many other players who were part of the designing of the flag, when you look
yes,
at the colors and the connotations behind colors, or the
yes,
symbols that we use and the pictorial symbols that people pick up on, or how something can mean or like direct you towards a certain community, but also could connote peace or all of these
true.
other sort of philosophical ideas. And so looking at that, and then at the same time, having the construction of Central Vista,
Yes,
yeah, was happening side by side for me at that moment, because one, we were questioning what the reason is to be putting this much money into the reconstruction of a space at a time like this. It was very contextual. It could have been done at any other time. And then looking at the flag. And so when you look at the symbols that even the architects have picked up on to create, for example, the new building of the parliament,
yes,
these were the new constructions that were bringing in new ideologies into our present.
true.
And so the flags really represent that. They're metal flags that look like cloth that is sort of
I, w- I
stuck in
wanted to
front
ask.
of that.
I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you this. Like you've not made it malleable. You've made it metal piece, and that's something with the materiality. That's something I wanted to ask you about. Why metal? Yes,
Yeah. So they're sort of stuck in time in terms of they do look like cloth. If you look at a photo of it, it does look like it's sort of swaying
waving
around.
in. Yes,
Yeah. But it's also tethered to the wall with two little screws, and that's all that holds it. So it does talk about the fragility of these
yes,
ideologies,
yes.
along with its own representation. So each flag points toward a certain moment and very contextually present within 2021 and what we were going through at that time. And I think it'll always end up reflecting that moment.
All right. Let's forget 2021. It was really horrible. Let's go. Last question towards the future. What's happening? What are you aiming at? Where is the future taking you? And how do you see? Do you feel like you are? Um, I know that you have an interest in pushing your ideas out wide and large, and you kind of like you do take as much interest in producing your work, but you also have interest in making sure that your ideas are disseminated. So how do you feel like? And I don't mean this just as a woman artist, or I'm saying that to put your voice out there and to kind of craft a niche for yourself and kind of like make your space. Do you feel what advice would you give the next artist, the upcoming artist, and how they can maybe raise their voices and kind of like make a space for themselves? This is the last question.
Mm.
But and also, where you going? Where you going? What are you doing? What are you doing? Where you going?
Um,
I'm really
for
excited to know this. Yeah.
I think, okay, so one of the things that we um, are never really told about and don't really even learn in art school is that we need to stop waiting. As artists, we need to stop waiting. Like, don't wait for someone to come and do something for you. Sort of put
You
yourself
also,
out.
sorry. You should also, people should also know that you have recently, during the pandemic, you did Arts in India. That it was, a community-based project where you started helping younger artists broadcast their work. So you're also in a way like almost, I don't know what to say, but you were kind of like a co-op. I looked at you like a philanthropist. You like kind of like made so many things happen. So many people made so many connections because of you. You did raise that platform, and I'm asking this question from that lens. Is that you did
Mm.
create a space. You gave opportunity. You give access. You kind of like opened up space for a lot of people. And many people have told me that I just like Art in India. What you guys did was pretty empowering. So, but within your own capacity, I know you've done that. Maybe the people don't know. So, can you just kind of like take us through that journey too?
Yeah, we started, Purvai Rai and I, who's a fellow artist, started Art in India initially in response to the pandemic
Yeah.
and artists within that space. And
Oh,
today
nice.
it
Yeah.
exists as three laterals. The first is an alternative market space, which is on Instagram. And the idea here is that it functions as a space where the artists can directly speak to the person that they're selling their work to. And second is that there's a pure support endeavor through it, where when an artist sells 5 works, they buy another artist's work from the art
Yeah.
chain. And
Yeah.
it we sort of end up creating our own ecosystem where we're all sort of helping one another do that what we love.
Cool.
Um, the second is the review chain, which was spearheaded by Radha Mahendru. And she came on board. The idea with this is that there was suddenly a lot of grants and other things being made available to Indian artists.
Yeah.
But every application requires you to communicate yourself in English, but
Cool.
also communicate yourself in a specific way. You have to create a portfolio, you have to have a CV, a personal
Yeah.
statement, and so on. So what does that mean? What does that actually, what
And
information that is that supposed to hold?
yeah.
And then we put an open call out there for anyone who wanted help. And so the idea with the review chain is that if anyone asks for assistance, they receive it. It's on a first come, first serve basis. And there
Amazing.
were, in the first iteration, 12 people, and in the second, 21 people who came
Wow.
together from the art scene to assist people in writing the application. So it's the pre-application help rather than the jury and everything else that takes place and
That's
the bias and
fantastic.
subjectivities that take place after the application has been sent in. And the third is Art Chain Legal, which Virangana Solanki and Farah Mullah came on board to start.
Yeah.
And here the idea is for us to, as artists, to know about our legal rights in India, which are pretty fantastic, but haven't been utilized in the right
Yes.
way.
Yes.
To how to utilize them, how to implement it. Even on an email, when you're sending a design, what is a copyright message that you can have so that you are protected? When you put up your works on Instagram and so on. So from the simplistic to later on going into contracts and clauses,
That's
which it
amazing.
can grow and become. Yeah.
How old are you again? May I ask you?
Yeah.
How are you doing so much? Okay, you don't want to answer that. Looks like I'll Google it. Everybody Google it. All right. So okay, I have I have I have no more questions unless there's something. If you want to release, what are you up to? What's your next show?
Oh yeah. Okay.
What's coming up?
I can skip that. There are a few things that are on the pipeline. I work with a lot of collaborators. there's Misal Soro in Miami, and we're creating the new public sculpture later in the year in Miami
Yeah,
itself. That we've just
nice.
received funding for. The second is Jyoti Das KV, who is a performance and printmaker based in Delhi.
Yeah,
And we are working on a few new iterations of a project.
yes,
There's Jodie Davies, who I work with, who's a political scientist in I had met her in Chicago. She's now in LA, but we're working on an academic paper that relates to monuments and monument making. I'm working on a project, a few other projects, which are my individual art practice. So one is to do with one of our kinetic sculptures, but a
nice.
larger iteration of it has fragments of architecture that are then taken from salvage stores, brought into the gallery, and various things happen to them in terms of the way conflict erases histories, but in a very physical um, exhibition of
Yeah,
that. And and then the hybrid amalgamation drawings were initially envisioned as physical sculptures. So
yes,
we're starting to prototype those in small this sort of scale, so a 2 foot or 1 foot scale, to understand what they would be like as physical sculptures. So I'm working with architects and also working with 3D printers and um, people who work with casting and molding to
lovely,
create these forms.
lovely. That's amazing. This is the end of the interview, and I really thank you for this chat. Thank you for giving your time.
So much together.
Yes, my pleasure.